The first thing to do is ignore the distractions. Set aside the headlines, the celebrity photographs, the public appearances, and the endless debate surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Strip away the commentary, and focus instead on something far less dramatic, but far more revealing: official records. Hidden inside a delayed financial filing submitted by the Invictus Games Foundation is a collection of figures that raise questions deserving careful examination. These aren't leaked documents, anonymous accusations, or speculative reports. They are numbers contained within paperwork the foundation itself submitted under its legal reporting obligations. Once those figures are examined together, they tell a story that many people never noticed, because very few took the time to read the filing from beginning to end. One statistic immediately stands apart. According to the accounts, direct grants distributed to organizations supporting wounded veterans declined dramatically within a single reporting period. The amount fell from more than £500,000 to just over £200,000, representing a reduction of approximately 63%. On its own, that number naturally attracts attention. Yet the significance becomes much greater once it is compared with other financial changes recorded during the very same year. Ordinarily, a charity reduces spending because donations decline or financial pressure leaves fewer resources available. That explanation appears reasonable until the remaining figures are considered. During the same reporting period, the foundation's reported income increased substantially. Financial reserves also expanded, climbing beyond £2 million. At the same time, organizational restructuring included the creation of a new senior executive position carrying a six-figure salary. These developments moved in opposite directions. Revenue increased, savings increased, administrative leadership expanded. Meanwhile, direct financial support reaching veteran organizations moved sharply downward. Naturally, financial statements rarely provide every answer. Annual budgets shift, long-term projects require planning, and charitable organizations frequently experience temporary fluctuations in expenditure. One year's figures alone cannot establish wrongdoing or misconduct. Nevertheless, responsible financial analysis begins by identifying unusual patterns rather than drawing immediate conclusions. When multiple significant changes occur simultaneously, they deserve closer examination rather than casual dismissal. That is precisely why these accounts deserve attention. Instead of relying on rumors or social media commentary, the discussion begins with documentation filed under legal obligation. The Invictus Games Foundation operates as a registered charity in the United Kingdom. Like other registered charities, it must comply with regulatory requirements overseen by the Charity Commission. Trustees carry legal responsibilities to ensure that charitable resources are used consistently with the organization's stated objectives. Financial reports are independently reviewed before submission, providing an official snapshot of how funds were managed during each reporting cycle. The foundation publicly describes its mission as supporting the recovery and rehabilitation of wounded, injured, and sick service personnel through sport and community engagement. That purpose has remained central to the organization's public identity since its creation. Consequently, any noticeable reduction in direct financial assistance for veteran organizations naturally prompts questions regarding how available resources were allocated during that period. An equally important detail concerns timing. These financial accounts were not submitted according to the usual schedule. They arrived approximately 2 years later than expected. Although delayed filings do not automatically imply financial irregularities, they inevitably reduce transparency by postponing public scrutiny. During those missing years, public discussion largely focused elsewhere, leaving the contents of the accounts almost entirely unnoticed until recently. The delay itself explains why these figures attracted so little attention. Financial reports are lengthy, technical, and written primarily for regulatory compliance rather than public interest. Most readers never examine them. Instead, they rely on press releases, interviews, or media summaries. Those secondary sources rarely highlight detailed accounting entries buried deep within official filings. As a result, information that has technically been public for months or even years can remain practically invisible. Looking carefully at these records changes the conversation. Rather than debating personalities, attention shifts toward measurable financial decisions. The central question becomes remarkably straightforward. If income increased while reserves also expanded, why did direct grants supporting wounded veterans decline so significantly during the same period? There may be explanations consistent with sound financial planning, but those explanations are not immediately obvious from the published figures alone. This distinction is critical because evidence derived directly from official accounts carries greater weight than unsupported allegations. Anyone examining the filing can review the same numbers and reach their own conclusions. No confidential source is required. No anonymous whistleblower supplied the data. Everything originates from documentation submitted by the Foundation itself under established legal requirements. Viewed through that lens, the discussion becomes less about celebrity controversy and more about governance, accountability, and transparency. Charitable organizations exist because donors, governments, sponsors, and the public place trust in them. Maintaining that trust depends not only on achieving worthwhile goals, but also on demonstrating clearly how financial resources advance those goals. Whenever official records reveal substantial changes in spending priorities, careful questions become part of responsible oversight rather than unfair criticism. For that reason, the filing deserves examination on its own merits. The figures neither prove misconduct nor eliminate legitimate concerns. Instead, they establish a factual starting point for further analysis. Before anyone reaches conclusions about responsibility, intent, or regulatory consequences, the numbers themselves must be understood accurately. They provide the foundation upon which every subsequent question rests, making the paperwork, not the headlines, the true beginning of the story. Every organization is ultimately measured by the difference between its promises and its performance. Mission statements describe aspirations, but financial records reveal priorities. That is why the Invictus Games Foundation's published accounts deserve careful attention. Rather than relying on speculation, criticism, or public opinion, the discussion begins with official documents filed under regulatory requirements. Those records offer an opportunity to compare what the organization says it exists to accomplish with how its resources were actually allocated during the reporting period. The Invictus Games Foundation is registered as a charity in the United Kingdom, placing it under the oversight of the Charity Commission. Like every registered charity operating within that framework, it is expected to maintain proper governance, submit annual financial statements, and ensure that charitable funds are directed toward the purposes for which donors and supporters contributed them. Trustees carry legal responsibilities, not simply ceremonial titles. Their role is to safeguard the charity's mission, while ensuring that financial decisions remain consistent with its stated objectives. According to the Foundation's own public materials, its purpose is to inspire recovery and rehabilitation for wounded, injured, and sick members of the armed forces through sport, competition, and long-term support. That mission has helped attract governments, corporate sponsors, private donors, and volunteers from around the world. It is the foundation upon which public confidence has been built. For that reason, the financial figures contained within the delayed filing deserve closer examination. One number immediately captures attention. Direct grants distributed to veteran organizations declined sharply during the reporting year. The reduction amounted to approximately 63% compared with the previous reporting cycle. If viewed in isolation, that figure might simply reflect changing priorities or the completion of specific programs. However, financial analysis rarely depends upon a single statistic. Instead, meaningful conclusions come from examining several related figures together. During the same reporting period, the Foundation reported a substantial increase in overall income. Financial reserves also continued to grow, eventually exceeding £2 million. Those developments ordinarily suggest an organization with stable or improving financial health rather than one facing serious budgetary constraints. At the same time, the organizational structure expanded through the addition of a new senior executive position carrying a six-figure salary. These developments create a contrast that naturally encourages further questions. Increased revenue generally provides greater flexibility. Larger reserves indicate stronger financial security. New executive positions often reflect organizational growth. Yet direct grants supporting external veteran organizations moved in the opposite direction. The accounts themselves do not immediately explain why those trends occurred simultaneously. It is important to distinguish between questions and conclusions. Financial statements alone cannot establish improper conduct. Charities regularly hold reserves for future projects, manage multi-year commitments, or delay expenditures until planned activities begin. Likewise, administrative costs can rise for legitimate operational reasons. Responsible analysis recognizes those possibilities, while acknowledging that unusual financial patterns deserve careful review rather than immediate assumptions. Another significant aspect of the filing concerns transparency. These financial accounts were submitted considerably later than expected. While delayed reporting does not automatically indicate misconduct, it reduces the opportunity for timely public examination. By the time the accounts became widely available, public discussion had already shifted toward other issues, allowing these financial details to receive relatively little attention. One reason the filing remained largely unnoticed is its technical nature. Charity accounts are written primarily for regulators, auditors, and financial professionals rather than general audiences. Most supporters never read them. Headlines often summarize broad achievements, while detailed accounting schedules remain buried within lengthy reports. As a result, important financial developments can remain publicly available without attracting meaningful scrutiny. Examining official documents changes the conversation. Instead of debating personalities or media narratives, attention shifts toward measurable financial information. The discussion becomes less about reputation and more about accountability. Public confidence in charitable organizations depends upon openness, consistency, and the ability to demonstrate that available resources are advancing the stated mission. This is precisely why official filings matter. They provide a factual foundation for informed discussion. Whether one ultimately views the reported figures as entirely reasonable or deserving of additional explanation, the starting point should always be the documented evidence rather than speculation. Numbers contained within legally required reports deserve consideration because they represent the organization's own account of its financial activities. As additional details emerge from the accounts, broader questions begin to appear regarding governance, expenditure priorities, and the relationship between organizational growth and direct charitable impact. Those questions do not automatically imply wrongdoing, but they do illustrate why transparency remains one of the most valuable principles governing charitable institutions. Public truth depends not only upon noble objectives, but also upon the willingness to demonstrate clearly how financial decisions support those objectives over time. The significance of these financial records extends beyond a single annual report, because the Foundation's activities involve more than private donations alone. The Invictus Games receive support from governments, corporate sponsors, charitable partners, and individual contributors. Whenever public funding becomes part of the financial structure, expectations surrounding accountability naturally become even stronger. Taxpayers, donors, and veterans all have an interest in understanding how available resources are managed and whether spending decisions remain consistent with the organization's stated mission. One aspect of the funding model that deserves attention is the relationship between the host organization for a specific event and the Invictus Games Foundation itself. In previous games, local organizing committees have received financial support from government bodies responsible for veterans, tourism, sport, and community development. Those organizing committees are responsible for staging the event, coordinating venues, and managing local operations. As part of that arrangement, licensing agreements allow the use of the Invictus Games name, branding, and intellectual property. Licensing arrangements of this type are common across many charitable and sporting organizations. By themselves, they do not indicate misconduct or financial irregularity. However, they do demonstrate that money allocated for hosting an event does not necessarily remain entirely within local operations. Some funds may be directed toward licensing, branding, or other contractual obligations established before the event begins. Understanding that structure helps explain why examining financial flows requires more than simply looking at headline funding announcements. Questions have also been raised regarding governance and leadership changes during the same general period. Public reporting noted that a senior board member who had joined the organization to strengthen governance later resigned after financial discussions surrounding the delayed accounts became public. The official explanation stated that the resignation reflected personal priorities rather than controversy. There is no confirmed evidence connecting the departure to the financial issues being discussed. Nevertheless, the timing has attracted public interest because governance transitions occurring during periods of increased scrutiny naturally encourage additional questions. Separately, some former participants have publicly described disappointing experiences when seeking assistance after injuries connected with competition. Those accounts reflect individual experiences rather than verified findings about the organization as a whole. Even so, such statements contribute to broader discussions about whether the support network promoted by the foundation consistently meets the expectations created by its public mission. Personal testimony should be considered carefully, acknowledging both its importance and its limitations. Throughout this discussion, one principle remains essential. Evidence should always be separated from speculation. Official financial statements provide documented figures. Public interviews provide individual perspectives. News reports offer additional context. Each source carries a different level of evidentiary weight, and responsible analysis requires recognizing those distinctions rather than treating every claim as equally established. The delayed filing, the reduction in direct grants, increased reserves, rising legal expenses, and changes in organizational leadership together form a pattern that observers may reasonably examine. At the same time, none of those factors alone proves fraud, misconduct, or personal enrichment. Regulatory bodies exist precisely because determining whether financial decisions comply with charity law requires careful investigation rather than assumptions based solely on public debate. Ultimately, the larger issue concerns accountability rather than personalities. Charitable organizations depend upon public confidence. That confidence is strengthened when financial decisions are explained clearly, governance remains transparent, and official reports are submitted on time. Whenever unusual financial patterns emerge, asking informed questions should be viewed as part of responsible oversight instead of an attack on the organization's mission. For supporters of wounded veterans, the central concern remains unchanged. Every pound, dollar, or donation entrusted to a charity is expected to advance the purpose for which it was given. Whether through grants, rehabilitation programs, sporting events, or long-term recovery initiatives, the measure of success lies in the benefit delivered to those the organization exists to serve. The financial accounts provide the starting point for that evaluation, not the conclusion. They invite examination, encourage transparency, and remind both charities and the public that trust is maintained through openness rather than assumption. As the remaining evidence is considered, the focus continues to return to the same question raised by the figures themselves. When resources increase, how should those additional resources be directed to best fulfill the mission promised to wounded veterans and their families? That question, grounded in the organization's own published accounts, remains the foundation for every discussion that follows.